So how many of you have heard of Intel and kind of know what we do? Lots of you, great. So yeah, we power the PC, we power the cloud. You're gonna buy a self-driving car with Intel inside it one day. So that's Intel. And you may have heard in January of 2015, our CEO, Brian Krzanich, came out and made a commitment around diversity. So he said, by 2020, we are going to be the first tech company that has full representation of women and underrepresented minorities. And so that was very exciting for us as a company because it was both a huge challenge and then also something that many folks, you may have heard of Roz Hudnall or Danielle Brown, have been working on for years in terms of growing our diversity and inclusion and making Intel a much more hospitable place for everyone. So kind of that's where that started. And so the Learning and Development Group, Global Leadership and Learning, was challenged and tasked with, okay, go build a program that's going to help, attain, retain our diverse candidates so that we can hit this, goal. And so we said, okay. So we went out and we started interviewing, as a good learning and development organization does. We interviewed our audience and said, okay, what do you need in order to be successful? And they said, thank you very much for asking. We need for the environment around us to change. We were like, oh, but what kind of program would you like? And they said, thank you. We mostly have PhDs or at least masters, and we're highly developed people. But everyone else the environment is not very friendly. We're like, oh, okay. So instead of creating a program for diversity, we created an inclusion program for everyone. And so we created a program called GROW, in addition to some other things, but GROW is the one I'm going to talk about today. So GROW stands for Growing Relationships, Opportunities, and Wins. And rather than it being a training, it was really a campaign, as you mentioned. And the idea around GROW is that this should be something simple. So as I said, we didn't want to admit our humanity at Intel, and so we talk about, you've probably heard this joke before, but the introverted engineer is the one talking to you looking at his shoes, and the extroverted one is the one talking to you looking at your shoes. I'm sure you've heard that before. And so we set this up around a series of habits, and the first habit was simply to warm up, which is, instead of looking at my shoes, look at my eyes, or instead of walking down the hall on my cell phone, walk down the hall and maybe even, look at the person walking by you and say hello, or have lunch with your coworkers, or that sort of thing. Literally just warm up at work, which seems simple, but was a huge transformation for how we interact with one another, because we are incredibly results-oriented and incredibly intellectual. So that was a really important one for us. The next one was to seek other perspectives. So Sally mentioned the expedience bias, and one of the things that happens when you get a group of experts who've been doing this work and making breakthroughs and innovations in it for years is they are often correct when they say they are always right. And so it becomes a habit of going, typically I'm right about things, so why would I ask someone else? And this gave people kind of that reminder to go and seek another's perspective, even if they think they're right. And as we know, diverse groups create better innovations and solve more complex problems more quickly. And so seeking other perspectives was a great habit. And then the next one was to include someone else. And so this could be someone who's not in your sphere, so someone you don't work with all the time. Do what you can to include them in a different way. So in our organization, this is starting to happen more and more. So we've been doing this for, a little over a year now. And you'll start to see in design meetings for different products, someone kind of random who's not on that team, and you're like, why are they in this meeting? And it's because we're including people more in order to seek those other perspectives and inviting people to the table. And that could be the work table or that could be the lunch table. Either way, it's going to create an environment where people feel included. And the more included people feel, the more likely they are to speak up. So, and that goes back to the request from that audience that we first spoke with, which is, what do you need? We need an environment that allows us to do our best work. We need an environment where we don't have to pound the table to speak up, but we're just included. And so it doesn't become a situation where we have to fight for our voice because our voice is requested. The last habit is add yet, and this is my absolute favorite one. So if you've been through any of the NLI growth mindset products or training or any of that, it's what primes your mind for growth. And you could say something terrible like, I'm terrible at talking in front of people. But if you add the word, I'm terrible at talking in front of people, and I can't do it yet. There we go. It primes the mind to say, but I can do it in the future. And so it's become kind of a habit around the office when people say, oh, I'm just bad at that, or I can't do it, or this is never going to work. We'll always go, yet, and it kind of changes the conversation. It makes people feel more positive, which puts you in that toward state, which allows you to be more innovative, creative, collaborative. So those are the habits that we're looking at as a company. Around diversity and really inclusion. So we should probably call it the ID as inclusion and diversity instead. I would talk a little bit about how we went about doing that, but my colleague Holly is actually going to talk about that after lunch at the Change at Scale. But we've included this concept, as we said, it's a campaign. So we've got our Grow campaign, but you can talk about seeds in our Breaking Bias workshop. We also have this embedded into our leadership programs, and Holly will talk about how we went through all of that. But at Intel, it became very, very important in this partnership for us to keep it simple, as Dr. Heidi Grant Halverson talked about yesterday. The reason we selected these short habits is because you can do one thing at a time, and none of them were incredibly difficult. So that was a really key learning from Intel.